So a quick thank you to our sponsor, Careerist, before we dive into today's episode. Because not everyone wants to spend their time learning how to code to get that elusive career in tech. And with Careerist QA Bootcamp, you don't have to. In just 4 months, you can have live training, a remote internship, and a career coaching that sets you up for success. Because in a world of job layoffs, QA is one of the fastest growing fields in tech. And there are currently 37,000 openings in the US right now, and with salaries up to $105,000. And Careerist grads, they're working at companies in 42 states, and with a very highly respectable 4.7 star Trustpilot rating, I think it's clear the model seems to work. And remember, if you don't land a job within a year, you get your tuition fees back. So what's the catch? Well, the only catch really is that the seats for the next class won't last. So you'll find the link in the show notes. Check it out. Let me know how you get on. Maybe I can get you on the podcast when you get that career in tech and tell me about your journey. But now it's time to get straight into the discussion with my guest today. What if the last great frontier isn't out there in space, but hidden beneath the waves right here on Earth? Well, my guest today has had an incredible career mapping the unknown, uncovering the mysteries of the seabed, and helping us all understand a part of the planet that still remains largely unexplored. Because today I'm joined by Mike Liddell. He's from a company called Fugro, and they are a company leading the charge in marine geodata and offshore innovation. And in our conversation today, we'll discuss how new technologies from advanced satellite communications and AI are giving vessels real-time connectivity with onshore teams, and how labour shortages have also reshaped the way the industry expertise is actually being deployed, and why the race to net zero by 2035 is driving them towards a smaller, more carbon-efficient fleet of vessels. And along the way, Mike is going to share some stories that will remind us just how much wonder still lies beneath the surface of our oceans. So, how do we balance technology, sustainability and exploration in one of Earth's most hostile environments? Yep, the ocean is a cruel mistress, but what does it feel like to literally discover mountains under the ocean that no one has ever mapped before? And on that note, it's time for me to introduce you to Mike. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi, Neil. Yeah, I'm Mike Liddell. I'm a professional surveyor, so I've spent my entire life, my professional life, really measuring and mapping the surface of the Earth, and mostly I've been doing that in a marine environment. So, mapping the seabed, modelling the seabed for offshore energy and communications sector. So that's where I came from. I'm a New Zealander, and I have a land survey degree from Otago University in New Zealand. I've worked offshore on vessels, acquiring data. I've worked onshore, processing that data, turning it into maps and visualizations that really help our clients safely design and install and manage their energy and communications infrastructure. So yeah, that's where I've come from. That's really a bit about me. I have a passion for mapping and understanding our planet, and most of my career has been about doing that in a marine environment.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me today. I spoke with Robert Hodenbach last year, and he blew my mind with some powerful stats. I think it was, despite covering 70% of the Earth's surface, only 25% of that ocean has been mapped, which completely blew my mind because it's leaving a vast knowledge gap in one of the planet's most crucial ecosystems. So for anyone hearing about your work, though, for the very first time, tell everyone listening a little bit more about the kind of problems that you're solving with technology.
Yeah. And the marine environment is really an extremely challenging environment to work in. And if I was to describe it to someone who didn't have any awareness of the environment, I would say it's a bit like surveying above the water line in heavy fog where you can hardly see your hand at the end of your arm while on a roller coaster. So these are the challenges that we have. It's a really challenging environment. The tools that we use above the waterline, light and radio, lasers and radar don't work really in a marine environment at all. Those signals die out really quickly when we try and push those signals through water. So that means we need to use alternative technologies. And a lot of the time that's sound or sonar that we use. And we have to get those sensors really close to the seabed to be able to accurately map the planet, the underwater ecosystem at a high resolution environment. So that's the sort of the challenging environment we work in. We're trying to get our clients the information they need to accurately design, to build, and then manage their infrastructure. They want to understand the shape of the seabed, the composition of the seabed, what the geology is. So we're down there, we've got our sensors close to the seabed, we're mapping that shape, we've got sensors on the seabed that are driving into the seabed to take samples. And we're also trying to understand the life within that environment as well, the flora and fauna within the marine environment. And that's happening often 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 meters down within the water column. So yeah, working in a really hostile environment.
And one of the things I try and do on this Daily Tech podcast is every single day look at an area of our world, of our life, of our work that is impacted by technology that people listening are very often blissfully unaware of. And of course, technology is making a real impact here on our planet. But can you tell me a little bit more about how the offshore wind and growing energy security demands are requiring smarter and more scalable operations?
No, and offshore wind is really critical to our future, and we see more and more electrification happening in our lives. And these offshore wind farms that are being built offshore, a lot around the UK, around Europe, in the Americas, in Asia, these are often really large areas. The size of these is often hundreds of square kilometers. So these are areas that we're surveying, we're mapping, that are often bigger than major cities, bigger than an Edinburgh city in terms of the size of these areas. So it's a very big activity to map these. It involves multiple vessels, often with numerous campaigns, hundreds of people spread over months or even years as we're mapping and understanding the conditions of the seabed, the risks within that seabed as well. And so this is where having scalable solutions really becomes essential. So we're focused on automation in those workflows, how we can drive greater efficiency, because in these really large areas, even small improvements often have pretty significant benefits on terms of how we can turn that data around. And that's been particularly relevant over the last few years where we've seen skills gaps. We've had recruitment challenges. There haven't really been enough people to enable us to really support the industry fully with some of these challenges. So that's why we're looking at how we can add new ways of working. I'll speak a bit later about remote operations, but also automation and robotics to really help us address some of these challenges.
And if we were to take a look under the hood here, tell me a little bit more about how these new technologies, including advanced satellite communications, are enabling real-time connectivity between vessels and onshore teams. It's fantastic what you're doing here. Yeah, so historically, we've had a lot of people on our vessels, and vessels have had to be somewhat like an island. All of the expertise we needed was on that vessel to undertake activities. And part of the reason for that is has been that connectivity or the lack of connectivity. Up until fairly recently, it's been very difficult to get high bandwidth connectivity on vessels. So 2 or 3 years ago, the bandwidth we had on vessels was probably more akin to the dial-up modem
that we had in our houses 20 odd years ago. But what we've seen in the last 2 to 3 years is really a significant transformation in satellite connectivity. High bandwidth internet connections of a similar speed to we have in our homes now is now available largely anywhere in the oceans. And that's really been significant for us. And that's a mixture of what we call geostationary satellites. So satellites that are way up in the sky, and we're constantly talking to those and getting data streaming from the vessel to onshore through those geostationary, but also these new technologies, these low Earth orbit mega constellations of communication satellites. And I think the one that a lot of people are aware of is the Starlink system, that now thousands of satellites, but there's others being developed. There's others that we're using as well. And we see that connectivity there'll be a much richer environment for connectivity going forward offshore. And to successfully transition people from offshore to onshore, to enable some of our remote operations technology, our uncrewed surface vessels, we're focused on how we can best leverage that multi-constellation solutions, so all of those technologies that exist, and how we can use IT technology to really knit those different constellations together to ensure that we have a very high reliability of connection to the vessel. So ensure we've got a broad pipe, so lots of bandwidth, but also to ensure that we have very high reliability there as well, so we don't have any delays to operations.
And I was reading before you joined me on the podcast today that labour shortages have pushed you to rethink how industry expertise is being deployed, shifting roles onshore without compromising technical excellence. And I think this is something we're seeing in many, many traditional industries right now. So can you tell the listeners a little bit more about the challenge and also how you're overcoming it too?
Yeah. So offshore operations have traditionally required those teams to be offshore on vessels. And what that means for our people working offshore is that they've typically been on vessels for weeks at a time, 4 or 5 weeks at a time on a vessel, away from friends and family. And it's not been unusual for some of our staff to spend in a 12-month period, maybe 6 or 8 months of the year offshore. And what we're finding is that this is really not desirable to a younger generation. That type of work-life balance is not attractive to them, and that creates real challenges for Fugro and the broader industry going forward. We also have a challenge that offshore working by its nature is isolated and a remote nature, and that has required that the team members working offshore have to pass a fairly rigorous medical assessment and also go through some fairly active survival training. And that has ruled out a number of potential candidates from joining our industry as well. So that has sort of reduced that talent pool. We also find that some of our junior staff may be happy working offshore for a few years, but then may get to a point in their career or in their family life that they no longer want to work offshore. And what we're focused on is really building an onshore work environment where we can deliver a lot of those same services from onshore, such that we don't have to put as many people offshore. And for us, that is about establishing remote operation centers, what we often call ROCs. But these remote operation centers really have a number of benefits for us. They give us that ability to have a broader talent pool within the industry. It provides an onshore career path for people that have gained valuable experience offshore, so they can continue with their career, continue involved in the acquisition of data, but do it from onshore. And we also see that it enables us to create a more diverse and balanced workforce as well. And what we've seen over many years is that actually our offshore workforce has a fairly heavy male. It's fairly heavily biased towards males. We do see that remote operation centers give us that opportunity to improve the gender diversity of our workforce as well. But what I would say there as well is we do very much value that expertise and that experience that we have offshore. And some of those people want their careers to continue to be working offshore. They don't want to come and work onshore. They're happy with that way of working, that being offshore for 4 weeks at a time. And we really want to preserve that expertise within our workforce. And we see that going forward, we will continue to have roles for people working offshore on crewed vessels. Probably slightly fewer roles on those vessels, because as we're moving people from the vessel to the remote operations center, the remaining tasks and the roles that remain offshore start to change somewhat. But their expertise is very much something that we want to keep offshore. But then the other big trend for us is the introduction of uncrewed surface vessels. So alongside our conventional vessels, we're starting to deploy uncrewed surface vessels, which are fully operated from our remote operation centers.
And aside from people and expertise and job roles, another big challenge is sustainability goals, which seem to be getting closer and closer. If we're looking at reaching net zero by 2035, for example, which will mean adopting smaller, more carbon efficient vessels. So how are you tackling a challenge like this?
Yeah, no, it's very much something that is important to us in Fugro. And we have a number of elements to that strategy. The uncrewed surface vessels, I'll call them USVs. Our USVs are a much smaller platform, and so they, being a smaller platform, have a much reduced carbon emissions. And we see that on those vessels, doing like for like operations, there may be as much as a 95% reduction in the total fuel consumption compared to a legacy vessel. We also have our crewed vessels, and I think when we think about our larger crewed vessels, they really serve two purposes for us. One is they're the platform on which we mount our sensors and payloads, so that those tools that acquire what we call our geodata. But they're also the hotel that has historically accommodated the maybe 20 to 50 people that we have offshore on the vessels. So a lot of these vessels have been taken up with the cabins that our teams stay in. And as we move more operations to remote operation centers, it means that we actually need less cabins on these vessels, and we can potentially undertake more complex operations from smaller vessels, which will also have a reduction in overall fuel emissions. There's a secondary benefit there as well. If we have less people needing to be on vessels, we need to fly less people around the world to get to the mobilization port of vessels as well. So it enables us to reduce the amount of flying of our workforce around the planet.
And I think if any of us scroll down our news feeds on any social platform of our choosing, we see a lot around corporate tech trends, the impacts of AI on corporations, enterprises, etc. But as someone that's making a difference with technology and making a real impact with technology on our planet, what tech trends excite you in this space? I'd love to hear more about that, and what excites you in the morning when you hear about this stuff.
No, I'm going to go back here to our uncrewed surface vessels, because I think this is something that's really exciting for us. For thousands of years, humans have navigated the seas with people on board vessels commanding those vessels. Now, for us, vessels are robots. These vessels, they have brains. They can make decisions about their surroundings and their environment. And these robots are being controlled and monitored from our remote operation centers, hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away. So that's pretty cool. But what's even cooler is that from these robotic ships, we're deploying subsea drones, what we call remotely operated vessels. So we're deploying these remotely operated vehicles. these ROVs that have a brain on them as well, and they're diving down hundreds of meters below the seabed. They're inspecting infrastructure. They're ensuring there's no damage to pipelines. They're ensuring there hasn't been any hostile actors damaging infrastructure or any collisions. And that's all happening remotely. So a robot ship offshore, from that robot ship, we're deploying another subsea robot that dives down to the seabed. And that's really pretty cool. And those uncrewed surface vessels are really leveraging a number of technologies. It's remote operations and our growth in remote operation centers. It's robotics, it's autonomy, and it's also the connectivity that I spoke about, which is really giving us an opportunity to have a whole new approach to how we collect our marine geodata.
And I'm curious, if we were to look at even further afield here, do you see any big changes in how you will unlock insights from geodata, especially as emerging technologies begin to converge?
Yeah, and we're already seeing AI tools involved in our workflows in terms of how we process and interpret the data that we log. And that's currently focused after the geodata acquisition. However, the next big step for us is really integrating these AI tools with edge processing capabilities on our remote platforms to enable instant decision making to be made by the robot, to the robots to determine how we acquire that data, to inspect the data in real time and make determinations of if we need to acquire more data, if the vessel needs to slow down, if we need to take imagery of a subsea piece of infrastructure from different angles. And so, yeah, really, as we go forward, that autonomy will become more and more capable within our marine robots, and AI starts to play an important role there.
And ultimately, if we zoom out for a moment, what would you say your grand vision is at Fugro? And also, how do you see technology further improving the planet that we all reside? This is something that impacts us all.
I've spent my career working in the marine environment, and our planet is a blue planet. I think we've probably all seen the famous blue marble photo that was taken from Apollo 17 50 odd years ago that really shows the vast areas of ocean that make up our planet. And we often talk about the rainforests being the lungs of our planet, but I think really it's the oceans that are the lungs of the planet. Those oceans store 60 times more carbon than the atmosphere, and they provide 80% of the oxygen that we breathe. So these are really critical, precious resources on our planet. And we as the occupants of this planet really need to have a much better understanding of the composition of our oceans and the characteristics of the seafloor. As I mentioned earlier, mapping that marine environment is incredibly challenging. The working in the fog on a roller coaster. And we see that the introduction of robotics, of uncrewed vessels, of remote operations really provides us with a transformative approach to how that enables us to really accelerate how we can gain that greater insight into this precious resource that is the oceans.
Wow. I think that is a powerful moment to end on. But before I do let you go, I'm going to try and have a little bit of fun with you here. We've talked about very serious matters today, the use of technology and how the oceans are actually the lungs of our planet. But on your many voyages, I would suspect you've had many funny or interesting stories that have happened in your career. Some you'll be able to share, some you won't. But is there a funny or interesting story you can share today?
I want to perhaps talk about one of the days that I think was the most memorable day in my career offshore. And it was quite a long time ago. I'm showing my age here somewhat, but the late 90s, doing a cable route survey offshore Brazil. And we were surveying with a tool called a multi-beam echo sounder, which was a relatively new technology at the time, and mapping the shape, the topography of the seafloor. Working in around 4,000 meters water depth, so very deep water. And I was the surveyor on shift, and the seabed had been very flat for hours, but we knew we were approaching an underwater sea ridge. And as we were coming up to that, I was looking at my operator station, and then I saw this underwater mountain starting to appear in the operator station. And over the next few minutes, this mountain got bigger and bigger, and this underwater sea mountain, or what we call a seamount, thousands of meters high, sticking out of the seabed, was emerged, and we mapped it at a resolution that had really never been mapped at before. And for me, that was a memorable day, because I really felt like an explorer discovering and mapping a new mountain on our planet. And that's really something that stayed with me for a number of years, because, your comment at the start that 70% of our planet is oceans and only 25% is mapped. And there's a huge amount of diversity and interest out there in our oceans that we still have to map and understand.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal. I was hanging on your every word there. What an amazing story. And I think very often we're so obsessed with space and looking up above our planet that we forget just how much value is right beneath our feet there. And as you said, so much of it is undiscovered, unmapped. But for anyone listening, I suspect we've set off a few light bulb moments. Maybe they want to find out more information about you and your work. Where would you like to point them today?
Yeah, they can look at Fugro.com, and we have lots of interesting articles on Fugro.com. Follow Fugro, or follow myself on LinkedIn. We're very active on LinkedIn and putting out examples of case studies, projects we're working on. So I think those digital resources, but reach out to me on LinkedIn as well, and happy to have a chat.
Well, for one, I've just loved chatting with you today and learning more about everything from new technologies like advanced satellite communications, enabling that real-time connectivity between vessels and those onshore teams, and also the labour shortages. Have they forced you to rethink how industry expertise is deployed? Not to mention the big sustainability goals and how reaching net zero by 2035 will mean adopting smaller, more carbon efficient vessels. So many big talking points wrapped up with that amazing story there. You really did have me on the edge of my seat, but just thank you for sharing your story with me today.
No, thanks a lot, Neil. It's been a really, really interesting discussion. And it's an exciting world out there in the ocean that we really need to map and understand.
Wow. Did that conversation make you look at the ocean a little differently? I know it did for me. And Mike Liddell's insights there from Fugro highlight the blend of human expertise and cutting-edge technologies that are shaping the future of offshore energy, sustainability and exploration. And it's just so cool to hear about everything from robotic ships, subsea drones, to the shift towards remote operations, greener vessels. It really is a story about completely rethinking about how we work with our oceans while also protecting them for the future. So remember, if you'd like to learn more about Fugro's work or connect directly with Mike, head over to fugro.com or find him on LinkedIn, where he and his team share fascinating case studies and updates. I know I will be. But after hearing today's discussion, what role do you see the oceans playing in tackling the big challenges of our time? It impacts each and every one of us. We all share this tiny planet. Let me know. techblogwriter@outlook.com, LinkedIn, X, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes. But that's it for today. I look forward to speaking with you all again very soon. But bye for now.